All right, class, we're going to do chapters 12 and 13 here. Get my screen. Let's do slideshow. And also, there we go. All right, chapters 12 and 13. We're going to talk about privacy, health, wellness, and safety in this chapter. Actually, in chapter 12, and then we'll get into chapter 13 in a second here. So let's talk first about like kind of just, well, yeah, there's, good talk about privacy, health, wellness, and safety. I mean, we've touched on some of these topics earlier, but we're going to kind of go a little bit deeper with these. The EEOC, what is that? It's the Equal Opportunities Commission. It's they publish essentially guidelines for private employers and a variety of social, legal, and ethical factors that come into play. What do they do specifically? For example, what they want to focus on is how should employers respond to an employee who has a problem, objects with complying with like a vaccination requirement. That's what the EEOC kind of gets into. What if the employee has a disability that precludes them from complying with a vaccination requirement? That's another EEOC area there or task. When is an unvaccinated employee a direct threat to the workplace? All of these are kind of, and this also ties into privacy. What kind of privacy issues are at place in the workplace, which leads us to privacy in the workplace? There's no clear legal definitions of what constitutes privacy or invasion of privacy, but everyone seems to have an opinion when one personally experiences such a situation. You might not think it's a big deal to somebody else, but then when it happens to you, you do feel like, okay, this is going too far. This is a breach of my privacy, invasion of my privacy. So those are very, very, very important topics. So workplace privacy, essentially it's the extent to which employers monitor and collect information on activities, communication, and private lives of others, and how much of it is intrusive and how much of it is kind of above the board. Electronic Communication Privacy Act, the ECPA of 1986, what did that do? That just basically dealt with the interception or unauthorized access of wire, which would be like phone, oral or electronic communication where there's a reasonable expectation of privacy is illegal under this act unless it is covered by one of the statutory exceptions or required by government compulsion. Some of these, could be illegal, in the workplace setting, but then you have something called the Patriot Act that comes in to place. And if, you're a suspect, in something larger or more nefarious. Background checks is always kind of like a hot button topic. These can include credit reports. Credit reports are important. Sometimes people think, oh yeah, what's a credit report? What's that going to show? Credit report can show kind of like, your how responsible you are and how you behave financially. Credit reports, criminal background reports, and other information for a range of sources. The use of consumer reports in the United States is governed under the Fair Credit Reporting Act, the FCRA, and by the FTC, the Federal Trade Commission. Background checks, a bit more about background checks. The FCRA requires employers to do a few things before getting information relative to background checks. These include: 1, inform the individual in writing that the information may be used for employment decisions. 2, inform the individual about their right to an investigation description if the background check includes an investigative report. So they can do the investigative report. They have to let you know ahead of time, and they have to let you know any findings that they kind of discover. 3, get written permission from the individual to do the background check. 4, certify to any outside background check provider that permission was obtained by the individual and the FCRA requirements were followed. Something called the ADA, the American Disabilities Act, that just basically requires that the physical exam be requested. Like, say you get a job, the physical exam to determine whether or not you have a disability can only be done after you've been offered a job. They cannot do that prior to doing so. Workplace monitoring. What can be monitored? That's always a big question. It's like, but with more workers working from home, with the remote options are there, you're at home, but you're still working. So there's kind of that fine line between what is work and what is private. When you're on the hours, it should be work related. With more workers working from home during the pandemic, employees monitoring software is now prevalent on computers. And according to employee lawyers, employees working from home can expect employers to monitor them by keeping track of what they type, recording internet activity, taking screenshots, using a device's webcam, noting which employees access what files and when, monitoring an employee's physical location using GPS, and measuring the employee's productivity, such as noting idle time. They'll know when you're not working. And that's why it's like, so people, hey, I want to work from home, but there's And just on a personal note, if you want to work remote over in person, I would go for the hybrid model. You get, for career advancement, you have to be in front of people, decision makers. If you're doing something absolutely remote, then sometimes you're just kind of just an invisible employee essentially. And I see that with employers all the time. I deal with employers every day, and they say that, you know what, you will not, it'll be very difficult for you to make advancements in your career. If you're doing something and you don't care about the job, it's just a job just to kind of support yourself. But if you want advancement, get in person. Workplace monitoring, a little bit of continued technology can work both ways. Webcams and phone cams can possibly serve as tools that employees can use to monitor their employees. Some companies have moved to ban them from the workplace due to fear of corporate espionage, of things, of tools that you're actually getting from your employers. Guidelines for the issues of monitoring. This is kind of very important. The 6 recommendations for walking that tightrope of employee monitoring and privacy issues. 1, choose metrics carefully by involving all relevant stakeholders, including new and old hiring managers, supervisors, and those actually being monitored. 2, be transparent with your employees about what you're monitoring and why. That's very important. I think for the most part, employees are okay with if you give them a good why you're doing something, or why you're asking for something, why you're making changes. 3, offer carrots as well as sticks to link to productivity and reward hustle. I don't know if you've ever heard the expression. It's like, you either motivate people by a carrot or by a stick. Motivation by stick is when basically kind of, you use a stick for kind of punishment. You punish people. Carrots is when you kind of dangle a carrot in front of somebody's face to kind of motivate them to do something, and there's a reward at the end. Except that very good workers will not always be able to do very good work all the time, especially under present circumstances. 5, monitor your own systems to ensure that people of color and other vulnerable groups are not disproportionately affected. 6, decrease monitoring when and where you can. Drug testing, it's a big topic. Companies say they need to do such testing to protect themselves and the public, but opponents claim the drug tests are not accurate and invade the employees' privacy. The legalities and ethics of drug testing, which could be perceived as privacy invasions by the employees if not judiciously used. So the arguments for drug testing. Opponents of drug testing argue that the cost of drug abuse on the job are staggering. And arguments against it. Opponents of drug testing see it as both a due process issue and an invasion of privacy issue. So if you have somebody who is, legitimately on drugs, addicted to drugs, or has a drug problem, that can negatively affect the business because the people they're not going to be reliable. There's who knows if they're coming to work, in the right frame of mind, the right state of mind, and so it can be a negative financial drain on a company. And the arguments against it are: is this an invasion of privacy? So it's kind of complicated. Mental health in the workplace. This is a kind of a topic that people, it's kind of more popular now than it's ever has been. Employees are often reluctant to discuss their mental health issues, either for fear of retaliation or firing, or simply because they are uncomfortable with discussing personal issues. According to the consulting group EY, Ernst & Young, employers that prioritize their workers' mental health as we emerge from the pandemic will gain an edge in the fight for top talent going forward. So when you kind of make sure that you let them know that you have a really good work-life balance and you really value mental health, that goes a long way and is very appealing for people looking for jobs. Like I said, work-life balance, and the family-friendly workplace. One study shows it's so important now that you have that work-life balance. One study shows the United States at 85.8% of males and 66.5% of females work more than 40 hours per week, and that Americans work hundreds more hours a year than Japanese, British, German, and French workers. When there's always been that reputation that Japanese workers traditionally work way more hours than us, and the Germans as well. But we here in the United States are working way more hours than those countries, people in those countries, and you have to understand, like, hey, is there a good balance here? And if you don't have that balance, are you going to be able to focus on work? Are you going to be as productive in work? Personally, when I've managed teams, I always stress to them, hey, take the time off you need. Here are some good times to take time off. We're going to have a 3-day weekend. If you want to take an extra day before, an extra day after, so you can stretch it into 5. I don't want this to be our work environment to be something like, hey, we're just racing to just to get through the weeks. I want make sure that you have, full and balanced lives. The phenomenon of burnout is so pervasive. Just 2 years ago, the World Health Organization categorized it as an occupational phenomenon resulting from workplace stress. And that work-life balance is how working people manage their time spent at and outside of work. Family Medical Leave Act, the FMLA. I have to deal with this kind of a decent amount with my full-time job. The Family Medical Leave Act was designed to make life easier for employees with families or health problems, and is commonly revisited as the workplace changes. Like if I have this next bullet point, is it precisely, I hired somebody, and then shortly after hiring them, found out she was pregnant. It was thrilled for her and her family. But then you have to, make sure that employee has, because of the FMLA, that they have all the protections and in place, and that they can take the proper and allotted and agreed upon time off. Under the FMLA, employees are entitled to 12 weeks of unpaid leave in any 12-month period for the birth or adoption of a child. Employees will be reinstated in their old jobs or equivalent upon returning to work. Health benefits during the leave period are protected from retaliation. The Easter egg, for no reason, number 8. Just the number 8 is the Easter egg for this section. This is section. I'm writing the note down. Chapters 12 and 13. Okay. And here comes chapter 13. The employment discrimination, diversity, and inclusion. Diversity and inclusion, or actually just the idea of just thinking DEI, that was not even anything that was on anybody's in their vernacular, and would just roll off the tongue like it just did with me, DEI, 5 years ago, 4 years ago. But diversity, equity, and inclusion. And I know there's a B on it. There's always different incarnations. I heard DEIB, diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging. But diversity is the presence of differences within a given setting, including differences in races, ethnicities, gender, or any number of characteristics. Inclusion, the practice of ensuring that people feel the sense of belonging. There's that B, respect and support from the organization. And then the federal laws, the federal government has made laws prohibiting discrimination. Title VII of the Civil Rights Act of 1964 basically states it prohibits discrimination in hiring, promotion, discharge, pay, fringe benefits, or other aspects of employment on the basis of race, color, religion, sex, or national origin. Age Discrimination in Employment Act, the ADEA, was also came about, and then there was the Equal Pay Act of 1963, prohibits sex discrimination in payments of wages to women and men who perform substantially equal work in the same establishment. Has it happened since then? Yes, it has. Is this a perfect solution? Absolutely not. It can happen. It will happen. But I think we're getting to a much better place, because as everything evolves, and we have more more women than men in the workplace, it's going to have to be more. It's going to have to be fair. While progress has been made on narrowing wage gaps, it is still fairly wide, with women on average earning about 17% less than men, which is terrible. The American with Disability Act we just talked about in chapter 12, the ADA of 1990, kind of a new reincarnation of it, and amended in 2008, prohibits discrimination based on physical or mental disabilities in private places of employment and public accommodations, in addition to requiring transportation systems and communication systems to facilitate access for the disabled. Essentially, the ADA gives individuals with disabilities civil rights protections similar to those provided to individuals based on race, sex, national origin, and religion. So what's the kind of expanded meanings of employment discrimination? It's more than just some kind of really kind of just narrow, conceptually, it's not as narrow as it used to be. There's a disparate treatment, what is that? That just refers to the intentional discrimination wherein people in a protected class are deliberately treated different, which is horrible. Examples: refusing to consider black citizens for a job, paying women less than men, or paid for the same work, or supporting any decision rule with a racial or sexual premise or cause. Essentially, it's when people are not treated fairly. And then there's disparate impact, which refers to discrimination that is intentional, unintentional, where the procedures are the same for everyone, but people in the protected classes are negatively affected. Sexual harassment, that's a big one. What is that? It says the unwelcome sexual advances, requests for sexual favors, and other verbal physical contact of a sexual nature can constitute sexual harassment when submission to or rejection of this conduct explicitly or implicitly affects an individual's employment, unreasonably interferes with an individual's work performance, or creates an intimidating, hostile, or offensive work environment. Some people are just, a little kind of slow or a little late to the game with this, but just anything that might make people feel uncomfortable, and just had to kind of be more economical and kind of edit yourself in your words. Religious discrimination, according to the EEOC, violations of religious discrimination involves a variety of patterns, including refusing to hire or fire workers after learning their religion, discharging workers who take leave for religious-related events, such as observing a Sabbath or the Sabbath for them, failing to accommodate religious-related clothing choices, which is that's an important one, for retaliating against employees who request religious accommodations or claimed religious discrimination. Oh, that's it. So that's it for chapter 12 and 13. Yeah, that's it. And this sucker.